How do you track food at restaurants? Let's talk about it.
Don't you want to look good naked?
So when it comes to tracking food at restaurants, there's a few different ways that you can go about it. It really depends on what your specific goal is and where you're at with that goal and how accurate you want to get with the tracking. So I always like to start with kind of pre-planning. So if I know I'm going to a specific restaurant, I like to look up the menu ahead of time and go in with a game plan, right? So if I'm tracking for a day and I know that I have a certain calorie target to hit that day and a certain protein target to hit that day, I'm gonna go into my tracking app and plan the rest of my day and leave a good amount of calories for that meal out that I'm eating at the restaurant. The reason for that is because restaurant foods, there's a lot of extra calories that can get snuck into the foods that we don't even realize. So lots of cooking oils and butters and sauces and all of that stuff that can add up really, really quickly. So I always tell my clients, and for myself, I typically overestimate when I'm going out to a restaurant. And like I said, leave myself enough room in my quote unquote calorie budget for the day to account for those extra oils and those things that you might not realize are actually in those dishes. So that's the first thing. Just having a plan going into the meal is going to be super helpful and actually take some stress away. So I like to plan my day ahead of time and leave extra room for that. And then also look the menu up ahead of time and think about, okay, what do I want to get? Even pre-tracking that into your, whatever you're using for a tracking app, you can pre-track the meal and guesstimate it ahead of time. And then obviously once you get there and see the portion size, you can adjust those. So that's one thing to think about. Something else to realize is that the more aware you are of tracking your food, so the more that you're weighing your food out at home and you're using a food scale, the better off you're gonna be when you're going out to restaurants or when you're eating at someone else's house and you don't know exact amounts of foods. You're basically training your brain to realize, okay, this is what 6 ounces of steak looks like, or this is what, a cup of mashed potatoes with butter looks like. I don't know, just random examples. But when you measure your food at home, you're basically training that muscle memory or food memory, whatever you want to call it, to be able to estimate those portion sizes or guesstimate a little bit more when you're eating out and you don't have access to a food scale. So that's just one thing to think about, is that awareness that you're building, and you're kind of practicing that when you're at home, and that's going to give you a lot more structure and actually a lot more freedom when you go out to eat, especially if you are tracking. Another tip when you're tracking and eating out at restaurants is to think about ordering dishes that have the least amount of ingredients, or ordering dishes where you can really see those ingredients on your plate. So that's gonna make it a lot easier to track because you're actually able to see the different food groups that are on your plate, versus if you were to order like a stew or some type of baked dish, it's probably gonna be a lot harder to guesstimate that. So if you are, trying to be super accurate with your tracking, or just trying to stay on track with what you're doing, and you have specific goals and a specific timeline, just make sure that you're being smart about the choices that you're making. One other thing is, don't be afraid to ask questions. So this is something that I do a lot at restaurants. I ask a lot of questions. I ask for a lot of things on the side so that I can control my own portion sizes. So if I'm going out to eat breakfast or brunch and I'm ordering an omelet, for example, I'll order that omelet dry and I'll say, can I get it with no oil or butter, or just a very small amount of oil when they cook the omelet? I'll also make sure that there's nothing else in the egg batter. Sometimes if you go to chain restaurants, for example, IHOP and places like that, they might add pancake batter into the omelet batter or omelet mixture to make it more fluffy. So that's some things that people don't realize, but you always want to ask questions, right? And ask for modifications, or don't be afraid to ask for things on the side or to make adjustments to your order. Typically if I'm out with a group of people, I don't really feel self-conscious about this anymore or anything like that, because I've been doing it for so long, and you really shouldn't feel self-conscious about it. But if you do, just think about, okay, let me let everybody else order first, and then I can order last and make any adjustments or requests to my order. And if you ask nicely and you're very particular about why you're asking, so for example, sometimes if I'm at a place and I know that maybe they might not be paying attention too much to the amount of oil they're using or the type of oil they're using, I might say, I'm allergic to this oil. Can you please make sure that it's not in that dish? So even if I'm not allergic to it or I don't have a food sensitivity, sometimes I'll use that as kind of a white lie. And that's something that you can do. There's nothing wrong with that. If you truly want to be as accurate as possible, you have to take control and you have to ask questions, and you can't be afraid to do that. So for example, if I'm going to order a salad, I'm probably gonna ask for a few of the things that are more calorie dense on the side so that I can control how much I'm using. So for example, I'll ask for the dressing on the side. If there's any cheese, sometimes I'll ask for the cheese on the side because that adds up really quickly. I'll ask for any nuts and seeds on the side. And that's so that I can really control how much I'm using, and that will also make tracking it a lot easier too. So when you're eating out at restaurants, don't be afraid to ask questions, ask for things on the side, make modifications. You need to do what makes sense for you and not worry about what anybody else thinks. As long as you're polite and you are smiling when you ask these things, you'll be totally fine. And yeah, take control of what you need to take control of and you'll be good to go. Women, we believe